The learner is the center of the teaching learning process. Their active involvement is crucial to the success of meaningful learning engagement. Let us examine the community of inquiry in Jesuit education and see how we can best maximize this in our own classroom practice. As we look into COI, these are some of the things that will guide our progression. We will remember that as a Jesuit education, we are reminded and guided by the IPP or Ignatian pedagogical paradigm with components of context, experience, reflection, action, and evaluation. We'll also look into CUI, but this time looking beyond the online teaching and learning environment. We'll also be looking at the blending of CUI and IPP in classroom practice. It is also expected in this material that we'll be able to look into the components, the elements, and see how the blending of these two important frameworks of IPP and CUI works in our classroom teaching. The community of inquiry framework, espoused by Garrison, Anderson, and Archer, indicated the different components. We can also see the blending of these different presences as we aspire to provide a meaningful experience and environment for our learners. In practice, CUI is a framework that guides mostly the virtual learning engagements. It has succeeded in optimizing learning environment. It is important to note then that this collaborative model has three interdependent elements that includes cognitive presence, social presence, and of course, teaching presence. Cognitive presence refers to the ability of learners to construct meaning through sustained communication. Social presence, on the other hand, refers to the ability of students to be themselves in a community of their peers. Teaching presence also indicate the teacher's ability to do major things, two things which involve selecting, organizing, as well as delivery of teaching materials, and at the same time facilitating social and cognitive presence of learners. Now, let us examine each presence and look into how we can best maximize this beyond the virtual platform benefits that it had already offered. The practical inquiry model is seen to display how this can best be applied. The students here are independent learners who continue to research, reflect, and integrate or share their learning with others. These are also the same experiences we want our students to undergo. The experience that we provide our students will encompass the elements presented in this practical inquiry model. Using this model, how can cognitive presence be brought into or displayed in the classroom? This table presented by Garrison and Company exemplifies how we do this in the classroom. Our lesson may start with a triggering event. We allow students to explore materials. We provide them avenues to integrate this into existing knowledge and expect them to apply these new ideas in an authentic practice. How do we foster this in the classroom? We can ask ourselves the following questions. First, are our students given activities to reflect on and process new information? Do we consider students' interest in the topic? Do we also guide students towards learning about the topic? And lastly, do we also help students to construct a solution or understanding? Next is that of cognitive. After the cognitive presence comes social presence. In online teaching and learning, this is ensuring that learners connect effectively. It is not just engaging them with the material, it is connecting and sharing or expressing the feelings and support. This is evident in the teacher's efforts to ensure that for every learning episode, the components are in place. What are these components? That there should be this affective expression and open communication, at the same time, group cohesion. In the virtual context, this can be evident in the use of emoticons. What do you do in your face to face classes that ensure connection and communication? I'm sure you have other strategies on how this can be integrated and also displayed by the learners. Open communication is also one that we need to really ensure in order for us to display social presence as well as that of group cohesion. Here are some of the questions that we can ask so that we can reflect and make sure that we address social presence in our class. Do we allow or make our students feel comfortable asking questions and even caring or sharing their opinions? Are there clear expectations for civil discourse in our classroom, like guidelines for how they are to express this peer to peer or students to instructor? Do we also allow or ask students to lead discussions such that they will develop sense of social cohesion in and among themselves? I am certain that you have a lot of other things that you can add to the list of the suggestions and that you have already been doing in your class. The next one is that of the teaching presence. This consists of two functions that includes designing and facilitating the emotional experience of learners. And these are very much defined by the roles and the responsibilities of the teacher as an instructor. And another thing is that to make sure that we also facilitate collaboration among peers. This table here depicts the role of to include in making sure that there is a clear definition of the topic for discussion and personal sharing of meaning and of discourse are guided by the teacher and are provided. Here are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves as we adhere to this component. We can ask them if, or we can ask ourselves, do we model civil discourse? Do we also encourage group activities that aim to develop critical thinking? Do our class activities reflect clear learning objectives? And do we instructors keep students on the task? Does the instructor also encourage students to come to resolve problems as a group? Again, these are only some of the few other things that we can add to the list as we grow in our teaching experiences. The remaining slide will share some of the examples where CoI meets SERE in our teaching practices. This material is an example of describing the interplay of this framework, starting first with C of the SERE, which is on the context. Now, in this table, C here is indicated as context of learning, the content, and the connection. All the things, these are also described so that this can best be seen in the course syllabi or course outline of the courses that we are teaching. And there is also an attempt to identify the COI elements present in all these different components. The next one is that of E, that stands for experience as well as engagement. Here we can also see the different elements of COI present and are being addressed. The next one is that of reflection or reaction. In this material, we can also see that cognitive presence can also be part or an element that is addressed as we try to make sure students reflect on the materials which we have actually provided for them. Action, on the other hand, and application can also be displayed or is will address when we require students to plan how they would act on the material that they have learned. We are actually also addressing the elements of COI, which could be teaching presence as well as that of social presence. Take note that these are all suggestions, and this could actually be improved, or even you could also think of other presences that can also be addressed as we look into and as we are guided by the IPP, the survey components. Then lastly, that of the evaluation. Evaluation would be very much displaying the element of teaching presence of the COI. This provide the avenue for them to look into both the product and the process. This is also the best avenue to identify the basis for future improvements that resulting to their growth. The next activity is that of sharing. And this actually can be done for as long as we are given time and even as avenue for this material allows. This can also be one way or one material that you can also look into ourselves and reflect whether we learn from what was being presented earlier. You can give your own definition of the elements of COI, and then you can also look into how this had been very much evident in your classes. We can also share our experiences of CRA as well as the practice of CUI in our own teaching. And lastly, we can also plan on how we can actually apply this in our classroom. Now, this material had allowed you to look into things and even uh, ask some of the questions and try to answer them personally in the process. Also did some reflection. We also have done some affirmation, like there are things that we all actually already do in our classroom, and we were thinking like whether it's a good practice or not, but this time it has been affirmed that you actually, one way or another, had already embraced the principle of either COI as blending it to the IPP or the survey components. And I would like to clap my hands for you because you have stayed with me through this about 15-minute presentation. And I'm sure and I hope that you will also be encouraged to practice what you have heard from this material and also try to really incorporate these things in our classroom. Now, according to William Wordsworth, whatever it is that we have learned, in order for us to really move forward, to begin, we are already encouraged to really begin. And the journey starts now. So this is me saying happy implementing and even embracing this framework in our teaching practice. Ad majorem de gloriam, to God be all the glory. Thank you for listening. This is me, Kathleen Morales, your friend, your co-sojourner, and of course, your kapamilya. Thank you very much for listening.